How many times in your life have you been told that you should stop procrastinating? How many times has someone gone up to you and praised you for working so hard? How many times have people asked you what you do for a living before asking anything else? And no matter what your answer is, I guarantee that you have hated these interactions. Whenever someone asks me these questions or tells me to keep up the good work, I have the same sensation that I did at the dentist when I was 6. Routine, clinical, devoid of emotion, and so tired.
And release all of those sounds that are trapped in your mind.
The fact is, we spend a lot of time focusing, thinking about, or planning our work week. I mean, it takes up 5 days out of 7 of each week of our lives. Makes sense it would be such a hot topic for conversation. But society's fixation on work has permeated into every other aspect of life, making relaxation nearly impossible.
I'm tired of suffering. Last
episode, we dove into how our mindsets on work are formed by the pressures of society, which creates a host of negative self-thoughts and behaviors. Our negative thoughts don't just happen in a vacuum. So while learning to discover our lazy selves is an important first step, we now need to unpack how others' opinions constrict our ability to be lazy.
Who told you you were hard to love? Who told you you weren't good enough? Who broke your heart and made you believe that you won't be anything without her? They better watch their back.
I think a lot of overachievers can agree that one of our biggest obstacles to laziness is time. We believe that, as the old adage goes, there simply aren't enough hours in the day. But if you break down the 24-hour daily cycle, you will find that most Americans have about 16 to 18 waking hours. Typically, a 9-to-5 job takes up a little more than 8 hours a day, leaving about half the day open for other activities. While yes, that time fills up with other obligations, it's clear that, generally speaking at least, there are enough hours in the day. So then why do we say that we never have enough time to spare for ourselves? Why is it that in between all our other obligations and activities, we can't seem to squeeze in at least a little lazy time? I believe that the root of the problem isn't the time itself, but how we have been conditioned to use it by society. We are told constantly that our time is precious, and when you believe, as we spoke about last episode, that work is the most important aspect of your life, then you tend to spend those precious minutes and hours on work rather than something else. Just like money, though, time is a finite resource, and us overachievers have got to learn to budget it better. And, to invest a little bit more in ourselves, too. In this episode of the Virtues of Laziness, we will discover how to take other people's opinions out of our schedules, with the goal being to make more room for laziness. My hope is to show myself and others that our time is our most precious possession, and that living in our productivity-driven society doesn't mean you have to give your time over completely to hustle culture. My challenge for this episode will be to push myself to include laziness into my day. Using my list from the previous episode, I will incorporate all 10 of my lazy tasks into one day and report back to listeners about my experience. The goal of this exercise is to 1, showcase how a person who is averse to laziness actually includes it into their days, and 2, to probe this lie we're sold that people do not have enough time for themselves amidst the hustle and bustle of our production-driven culture. So let's dive into this episode. Ain't nobody got time for that. This is going to be a tough one, but I think we can do it, right? Right? Time is a construct. Like a lot of things in life, it was invented to help humans put perspective on our existence and understand the changes we go through as we age. Social inventions like this started off as tools for understanding our world. However, like a lot of things in society, it became corrupted by the collective. With that understanding in mind, let's travel back to our definition of self-esteem from episode 1 for a moment. Our self-esteem is rooted in what we think, feel, and believe about ourselves. But how do we create those thoughts, feelings, or beliefs? The short answer is other people.
I used to think there was just fat and skinny. Apparently there's a lot of things that can be wrong on your body.
My hairline is so weird. My pores are huge. My nail beds suck.
Humans are by nature social creatures. We've evolved to live in packs, groups, or communities. Social psychology, which is the study of how groups impact individual behavior and thought processes, dictates that human behavior is determined by both a person's characteristics and the social situation they are in. In other words, our individual thoughts and feelings only make up part of how we act. We don't exist in a vacuum. Social influence is possibly one of the most powerful persuaders. Stanford defines social influence as the process through which other people change our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and through which we change theirs. If you've ever conformed to a group opinion, changed your mind after having a conversation with someone, or even thought about something differently after an offhand comment, you've experienced the power of social influence. For example, if you have a group of people in an office that all have a negative attitude, chances are, no matter how positive you start out in that environment, you will eventually yield to the pressure of social influence, and your upbeat attitude will turn sour. This is called groupthink. And, as you might expect, groupthink doesn't always lead to positive things.
When a group gets wrapped up in itself and everyone agrees with each other, no one stops to think about other perspectives. As a result, you get some big and bad ideas, including some enormous historical fiascos like the Watergate cover-up and the Bay of Pigs invasion and the Chernobyl nuclear reactor accident. So while two heads may often be better than one, it's important to make sure those heads are still open to different opinions, or they can do some really dumb stuff.
Now, normally, the social influence of groupthink doesn't lead to big international scandals or disasters, but it can lead to the creation of something called social norms. When a group of people get together and agree on a shared group of beliefs, attitudes, behaviors, and/or values, they have created social norms. Once created, norms, according to Columbia University, define appropriate behavior and expectations for those in the group. And not only do they define other people's behavior, but they also inform ours as well. Carol Dweck, a psychologist from Stanford, explains it best in her research. She proved that expectations drastically affect people's behavior, which in turn creates self-fulfilling prophecies for those expectations.
Teacher expectations can raise or lower a student's IQ score. A mother's expectations can affect the drinking behavior of her middle schooler. Military trainers' expectations can literally make a soldier faster or slower.
Society places many expectations on us based on established norms. Gender norms are one example of how norms play a role in creating the expectations we face in society. And, as any overachiever knows, expectations lead to pressure. Societal pressure can make people do some crazy things. There have been several psychological studies done on the effects of pressure and conformity, and how people can be pushed to do things they normally would never dream of doing, solely based on someone else's influence. Stanley Milgram's experiment in 1961 is a great example of the power of social pressure. At Yale University, Milgram gathered 40 participants and had them participate in what he told them would be learning experiments. Participants were led to believe that they were testing whether or not physical punishment had any effect on one's learning ability. When a learner, so-called, answered a question wrong, participants had to administer electric shocks. However, the learners were all actors and were not actually being shocked. However, they did act as if each punishment caused them pain.
Cloud, horse, rock, house. Answer. Wrong. 150 volts. Answer, horse.
These fake electrical shocks gradually increased in severity as the learners continued to answer questions incorrectly. The intent of this experiment was to measure the willingness of participants to obey an authority figure, who encouraged and demanded participants continue to shock the learners.
Experiment, that's all. Get me out of here. Get me out of here, please.
Continue, please. Go right on.
I refuse to go on. Let me out.
You refuse to go on?
The experiment requires you continue, teacher. Please continue.
The experiment found that a high percentage of subjects would fully obey instructions, and many went so far as to administer what would have been fatal shocks to learners. The pressure of authority figures on these individuals pushed participants to, as far as they believed, harm and potentially even kill others. While social pressure rarely has such drastic consequences, it is pervasive. And it's everywhere. By simply existing in society, we are subject to social pressure, as social norms and influence are necessary parts of living in a society. They are ingrained into our human experience. Of course, social norms aren't like, dark, menacing forces that just happen upon us like ghosts in a horror movie. People are the biggest culprits when it comes to spreading social pressures. Parents, friends, family members, bosses, neighbors, acquaintances, even strangers can place pressures on you by harnessing the influence of social norms. And of course, it doesn't just come from one party, it can come from all angles. As a young adult that will soon be confronting the challenges of the adult world, I have been feeling a lot of pressure. Every 3 seconds, it seems I have someone asking me what I'm going to do after school, where I will live, how I plan to support myself through my writing, how much money do I think I will make, and most dauntingly, will it be enough? Social pressures are hard at work on my psyche, turning my mind into a cesspool of worry. There are several different types of social pressures aimed towards specific social norms or influences. Many overachievers, at any stage in our lives, feel the same pressures as I do now. So let's unpack these social pressures to get a full picture of exactly what we are up against.
So much pressure, put it all on myself. I'll never measure up. Nothing is ever enough.
The way I see it, you can divide social pressures into 3 different categories: economic, social, and cultural. The biggest and most aggressive social pressure comes from money. Ask anyone what their most stressful, time-consuming concern is, 9 times out of 10, it has something to do with money. Paying for something, buying something, making more money, making less money, it all has to do with that dollar sign. And for me and other overachievers who want to pursue creative fields, that fearsome dollar sign only seems to get more intimidating. Monetary social pressure isn't simply about money, though. It's about the quantity of money you receive, and then what you do with it. You can't just make money. You have to make enough money, an amount that society has deemed acceptable, and then you have to spend it on the things that society sees as important. And how do you make this random sum of money to buy various supposedly highly important things? Well, you get a job.
All your gifts, all your powers, and you squander them for your own personal gain. Yes.
Work, as we have seen, carries its own pressures. Last episode, I talked at length about the individual pressures that work puts on us overachievers. What I want to do today, though, is investigate a more societal perspective on social pressures in the working world. As a Gen Zer, I have an interest in how my generation is viewed by older workers in the job market. After all, they're the ones doing the hiring right now. And my generation provides a very interesting case study on societal pressures. Gen Z currently is getting a very bad rap when it comes to work. Fox News gives us a great example of the hate that Gen Z gets when it comes to work. They state that in an August 2023 intelligence survey, 62% of respondents said that culture is the primary reason that many recent college grads are unprepared to enter the working world. But what does that actually mean? So-called experts apparently believe that people of my generation don't prioritize work, that we are flaky and want our jobs to accommodate our lifestyles, and worst of all, and most damaging of all, we apparently are entitled. When Gen Zers are constantly told that we are being too demanding or too entitled, we are met with the full force of societal expectations when it comes to work. According to social norms, you're supposed to be totally consumed by your job. You're supposed to give up all your time and energy to the company, and devotion, at least what we're told, is the only road to advancement. This seems to be the exact thing that Brian O'Connor warned us about last episode. Employers have bought into the mindset that pushing ourselves to do the hard stuff is a means of proving ourselves useful, which results in the ideology that people have the obligation to become worthy of one's humanity through carefully chosen acts of self-realization, or, as he understands it, acts of labor. Gen Z is not interested in buying into that toxic work-centric mindset, though. As someone who has talked with many peers about their future as part of the working world, a lot of us are fed up with this mode of thinking. We see ourselves as more of a generation who is shifting our priorities rather than neglecting them. We are prizing quality work over the number of hours we put in, and expect employers to understand the value of our time, even if we, as overachievers, are still trying to learn that ourselves. Part of reframing our work-centric mindsets is seeing ourselves as valuable, and that's a job that needs to be done both inside and out. Repairing our self-esteem is only part of the issue. Demanding that others treat us as valuable is the other. It's in this way that I encourage overachievers to start reclaiming some of our time, at least from our work.
This is the way we say hello. Let's be friends.
However, economic social pressure is not the only thing us overachievers have to contend with when it comes to facing social expectations. Societal expectations in interpersonal relationships take up just as much time and energy as economic pressures do. Almost every couple months now, it seems, I see an article about how more and more people do not want to have kids or don't want to get married or have less friendships than before. Several institutions, whether they be scientifically, religiously, or socially affiliated, seem to think that this is a bad thing, or at least a newsworthy thing. For example, one such group wrote that not only are those in Gen Z unwilling to hold others to the advantageous marital standards of the past, but they themselves do not abide by any moral marital code. In fact, more than 11% of 18 to 24-year-olds, the oldest in Gen Z, are living with an unmarried partner, which is the highest number ever recorded. Like this group, so many other people make this lacking desire for these social connections into a massive problem. But why is that an issue? Well, because society expects you to have kids, a ton of friends, and a fulfilling romantic life all at the same time. The societal pressures around socialization are some of the most prevalent in our society, from mothers trying to set up their children, to columns about coupling up, to reality shows on TV that push the narrative that you need to find love in your life in order to have a fulfilling existence. However, all relationships, no matter what form they take, need to be consensual on both parties' terms. As anyone who's been to high school knows, you can't be friends with everyone. And I've seen a lot of people, especially in my age group, that are beginning to prioritize social connections with people who fulfill their emotional needs, and vice versa, rather than simply trying to just be everybody's pal. Gen Z is prizing quality relationships over quantity, which means that our circles are smaller, but more tight-knit. Overachievers, whether we like it or not, also tend to be people pleasers, or at least that's what I've observed from my own life. I have never met a person who isn't high achieving who then also doesn't want to be friends with everybody, myself included. I desperately want to be kind to everyone I meet, sometimes to the point of absolute lunacy. And I think that my absurd level of niceness sometimes comes from the same hole I have in my self-esteem that pushes me to be an overachiever. So maybe, overachievers, we need to take a page out of the Gen Z playbook. Prioritize your wants and needs just as much as you do other people's.
We didn't get married, at least I'm not 40 and cursing our bed sheets, wishing I'd left you, wishing you'd left me, probably crying, I probably hate you, and though I'm unemployed, trying to find some joy, at least I'm not 40 and screwing the pool boys, staying for the children.
But first, let me take a selfie.
Lastly, anyone who grew up with technology knows the potency of cultural pressures. Even before social media, traditional media outlets like books, movies, and TV constantly shoved cultural expectations down consumers' throats. With the advent of the internet, those sources of pressure have only multiplied. My experience of cultural pressures is obviously different than others because I am a white woman who is in her early 20s. Clearly, I have a very different set of cultural expectations put on me than, say, an elderly black woman. However, I think we can all attest to the same experience of feeling cultural pressures based on your age, your gender, your demographic, and other identifiers that the world has placed on you. So, when I talk about my cultural pressures, I am of course talking from my own perspective. So, here's my example. When I scroll on Instagram, my feed is filled with perfect-looking women who seemingly have it all figured out. The perfect job, house, partner, garden, car, makeup routine, food, whatever. It makes me and a lot of other people in my age group feel like we don't have the right lifestyle or priorities, and that we need to change the way we live in order to fit into a specific set of social expectations. With social media, it isn't enough to simply look picture perfect. Your spaces have to be pretty. Your neighborhood has to be grassy and always sunny. Your dog has to be completely well behaved. You have to have the right wardrobe, the perfect hair and skincare routine, visit the coolish, niche, trendy places before anyone else does, and so on and so on. And you have to maintain this perfect lifestyle while also expressing your emotions in a palatable way. If you cry, it can't be an Oscar-worthy ugly cry, but a single crystalline teardrop falling perfectly down your cheek. If you're happy, you can't yell. Just smile really wide and giggle a lot. And if you're angry, don't even bother showing up, because anger is upsetting to people. And any complex series of emotions you have need to be perfectly articulated to your audience so they can properly judge how you're feeling. Because yes, now you have been conditioned to think about the world as if it was a stage and you're performing to a group of people. Every aspect of life has to meet social expectations now, so cultural pressures take up a vast majority of people's time, regardless of your background.
If a dark academic takes a picture of their coffee cup and handwritten journal, but no one's around to see it in the dark academia hashtag, does it make a sound? If we cease to experience life through tiny squares, lenses, and screens, does life cease to exist?
And when you think about taking all of these social pressures together at the same time, you can see how a person might look at you and say they have no time for anything else. I mean, if you're constantly chasing down approval and trying to meet society's expectations, you barely have time for anything else. Whether you actually fully conform or not, expectations influence your choices, slowly guiding your actions toward the norms through the power of social influence. But how is this going to help? I mean, knowing the power of social pressure only seems to make its influence more daunting to face. How are us overachievers ever going to escape the overbearing weight of social norms?
Little bit tired of trying to care when I don't. A little bit tired of quick repairs too cold. A little bit tired of sinking this water in my.
Here's an interesting conundrum that lurks behind all these societal pressures. I noticed this when trying to think about how I responded to these influences. I was going to write this whole long explanation of my own emotional turmoil, but then I realized something. Societal pressures don't always make me do things. I mean, yes, I will be getting a job and working for the rest of my life based on economic societal pressure, for instance, but here's the twist. While I keep worrying about fulfilling society's economic expectations for me, guess what I haven't done? Look for a job. I'm serious, I have only skimmed the job boards at this point. I'm paralyzed by the overwhelming pressure I feel, which makes me go against the societal norm. And even better, not only does the pressure make me want to not do that thing, it also makes me feel bad about not doing it. Like we talked about last episode, being told you constantly need to be doing something means that you base your self-image and esteem off of those expectations. As I said, no matter if it's society impressing the idea of wealth as a marker of our worth as humans, or our inner selves pushing us to keep creating to prove our value to society, we now live in an age where we measure ourselves by how much we have accomplished, and how well we have accomplished those things. And then when you don't accomplish what you set out to, and you don't meet those expectations, you feel like crap. And if you think about it, that's what tends to happen to everyone at some point. You know how you have to do something and are constantly being told to do that thing, and all it does is make you want to curl up into a ball and not do it? It's like the kid being told to clean his room paradox. So here's my suggestion. I think I'm going to take a page out of my fellow Gen Zers' books and start leaning into those reactions I've been experiencing this whole time. If you are constantly being pressured into conforming to social norms, inevitably, you'll begin to focus your time and energy on those societal expectations. Your time eventually will get taken up by those social expectations that are shoving you towards a lifestyle that you never even signed up for, regardless of whether you actually are moving towards meeting social norms or not. Taking back our time means intentionally doing what we have been doing all along in the face of societal pressure. Stop conforming. Now, no, don't crumple into a ball of nerves and worry intentionally every time you face societal pressure, but start listening to those instincts telling you not to conform. Gen Z has been doing this in the workplace for some time now, intentionally not conforming to force change in their chosen industries. Now, you don't have to take on a corporation or anything, but taking on a challenge of wiping out those fear responses with intentional reactions might be the way to start taking back our time. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to be honest, I haven't been able to fully commit to a day full of the things that I have on my lazy list. But I have been able to start to incorporate some of my lazy activities into my day. So while I wasn't able to actually fully complete the challenge I set out for myself, I did manage to start to do the things that I want to do more often. And I think part of the reason why I wasn't fully able to commit to fully getting into my lazy list and making a full day of it is that, honestly, it's not really realistic to try to, create a full day of lazy activities. At least not yet. But I did find that starting to incorporate things like taking a little bit of extra time in the shower, trying to make sure that I really enjoy the way my makeup looks or my outfit looks. I bought a puzzle recently, even though I'm not really a big puzzle fan. So those small things are really helping to keep myself calm and really bringing me back to my center whenever I have a super stressful day. And I think that there's a lesson in that for everybody. It's not about trying to fully, disengage yourself from society and social norms. That's not really all that plausible, right? But going back and creating just small pockets of time for yourself. So I hope that you guys can also start to implement some of the stuff from your lazy lists, and don't put pressure on yourself to do it all at once, right? The whole point is to not have that pressure anymore. So definitely don't put it on yourself, just like you wouldn't let anyone else put it on you either.
Tell you about yourself right quick. You are amazing. You are phenomenal. Honey, you pulled yourself out of shit that people thought would keep you down, but you rose like yeast, baby. You are gorgeous. You are fabulous. And every single time you look in the mirror, that's what you should see.
Will you ever be able to get rid of the aggressive presence of societal expectations? No, probably not. But are there better ways of coping with their influence? Absolutely. Your time is just that, yours, and it's meant for you to spend however you choose. Remembering your own power of control is the first step towards reclaiming your time, taking you closer to achieving personal peace. Remember how last episode I said that it feels like we're looking through a cracked mirror? Yeah, that cracked mirror we use to look at ourselves, the one that makes us feel as if we're unworthy of our humanity because we don't want to spend every second consumed by societal pressures. Let's turn it back around on the ones who broke it in the first place. The next time someone reminds you to stop procrastinating or asks you how you'll support yourself, ask them, and yourself, why? Why do you have to do something, or be something, or achieve something? Ask them who told them it was so important. Laziness takes practice. It takes some time, too. But it's time worth, quote-unquote, wasting. So here's my challenge for you. Take one day, an easier, less busy day, and try to incorporate just 1 or 2 things from your lazy lists we made last episode. Take 5 or 10 minutes and allow yourself to take back some of your own time. So am I suddenly cured? Do I now know how to be lazy? Nope! But we are almost there. In our next and final episode, we will discuss how to build space into our daily lives for relaxation. So until next time, this is the Virtues of Laziness.